The moment Tanya sat me down after dinner, I knew something was off. The way she fidgeted with her napkin, the silence that filled the space between us. It felt like the calm before the storm. Her hair, usually so neat and styled, hung loosely around her shoulders, like she'd just come from the salon. She looked distant, like she was trying to build up the courage for something she knew wouldn't be easy. "I think we need a break," she said, finally looking up from the table, her voice flat. I blinked. A break? Yeah, like a pause. Her eyes flickered away for a second, like she was testing how the words sounded. "I need time to figure things out." I felt a chill crawl down my spine. We'd been together 3 years, living together for 2. This wasn't just a casual conversation. This was a turning point. "Figure yourself out?" I repeated, my voice quieter than I meant. "Yeah." She shifted in her seat, almost uncomfortable. I don't know. I'm not sure about us anymore." That was when it hit me, Wade. She'd been talking about him more lately, the new manager at the salon. She'd even mentioned training late with him a few times. I didn't need her to confirm it. I already knew. "You want a break to see where things go with Wade?" I asked, my voice sharper than I wanted it to be. She looked at me, biting her lip, eyes darting away. "I mean, no, it's not like that," she said quickly, too quickly. "I just think we should, stay roommates for now. For practicality." "Practicality?" I repeated, a bitter laugh bubbling up. "So, you're telling me we're still living together, but you're not really my girlfriend anymore?" She nodded, her gaze apologetic. "Yeah." I stood up, pacing a little. The idea of her still living here, acting like everything was fine, made my stomach twist. But I wasn't going to back down. "Fine. But we're not doing this half-assed. If we're roommates, we're roommates. No exceptions." She blinked, looking confused. "What do you mean?" I pulled my phone from my pocket. "We sign a roommate agreement. Rent, bills, chores, the whole deal. If we're not together, we're not treating it like we are." Tanya laughed, a nervous, dismissive sound. "You're such a nerd. Call it whatever you want," I said, my tone cold now. "But it's happening." That night, I spent a few hours drafting the agreement. It wasn't mean, just clear-cut. Standard stuff. Rent split down the middle, who was responsible for what, and all the usual roommate rules. The next day, Tanya signed it without a word, probably more out of shock than anything else. But she did it. I moved into the guest room the next morning, like it was just another step in the process. The bed was small, the walls bare, but at least it was quiet. Still, the place felt hollow, the air thick with unspoken words. I spent the next few days separating everything: groceries, toiletries, the stuff that was mine and the stuff that was hers. I labeled everything. My cereal, her shampoo, the milk. Each item felt like a tiny slice of ownership, a tiny reminder that things had officially changed. By Thursday, I was over the details. I was tired of it all, tired of pretending things weren't different. I needed to make it real, so I pulled out my phone and started breaking down the rent and bills. I calculated everything down to the last penny. Her half of the rent, utilities, groceries. I Venmo'd her the amount, then printed an invoice, attached it to the fridge with a sticky note that read, "Due by the 1st." No drama, no emotion, just business. I wasn't expecting much, just the usual back and forth when it came to money, but what happened next threw me off. Tanya found the invoice late that afternoon. Her eyes immediately narrowed, lips pressed into a thin line. I heard her muttering to herself, then the sound of a chair scraping as she stood up and stormed toward the fridge. "What the hell is this?" she snapped, holding the printed page in the air like it was a personal insult. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. "The rent breakdown. Yeah, I get that. But why the Venmo request? And the invoice?" Her voice was rising, a tight ball of frustration. "You always paid more before. Why do you think I'm paying half now?" She dropped the paper on the table with a sharp slap. I kept my voice steady. "You're a roommate now, not a girlfriend. So you pay your fair share." Her face flushed, and she clenched her fists at her sides, taking a step closer to me. "So, that's it? This is your way of punishing me?" I wasn't in the mood to argue. I wasn't gonna back down, not now. No punishment. Just business. You made this choice, Tanya. I'm sticking to the terms we agreed on. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, in a sharp breath, she spun around and stormed off to her room, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. I exhaled, the tension in my chest finally loosening, but only a little. Later that night, I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. I heard her talking in her room, but it wasn't to me. Her voice was muffled, but I could make out the words when she spoke louder. Wade, hey, yeah, I need to talk to you about something, she said, her voice dripping with frustration. Can I crash at your place tonight? There was a pause. Then, I heard Wade's voice, muffled but clear enough. I don't think that's a good idea, Tanya. I've got roommate drama here. I can't really have anyone over. Tanya didn't respond right away, but I heard the sharp edge of her breath, a mixture of disbelief and frustration. Are you serious? What am I supposed to do? Then, there was silence and I didn't need to hear more. I knew exactly where that conversation was going, and it didn't take a genius to figure out what she was really trying to do. She was stuck in her own mess, unable to get out of the corner she'd backed herself into. I turned over, trying to shut it all out, but her door slammed open a few seconds later. The thud echoed through the walls as she paced around her room. I could hear her muttering to herself, probably trying to figure out her next move. I didn't respond. I just lay there, listening to the quiet rage building in her. She wanted out of this situation, but she didn't want to admit it. I wasn't going to let her off the hook, though. Not now. She had made her choice, and now we were both living with the consequences. The next evening, Tanya pulled out all the stops. The lights in the kitchen were dim, soft and flickering from candles, and the smell of something cooking in the oven lingered in the air. She was wearing the dress I used to love, the black one with the little lace detail around the neckline. I couldn't help but notice how she looked, but it didn't hit me like it used to. It didn't stir anything, not anymore. She was trying to reel me in, trying to act like everything was fine, like we hadn't just signed a legal agreement that made this whole thing official. She was trying to manipulate me, but I wasn't going to fall for it. Not this time. Hey, I thought we could have a nice dinner, she said, her voice softer than usual, like she was testing me. Maybe reconsider the whole pause thing? I raised an eyebrow, keeping my face neutral. Reconsider? You mean go back to the way things were? Her eyes flickered. Yeah, well, I've been thinking about it. Maybe I made a mistake. We can talk about it, you know? I didn't say anything for a second, just stared at her, waiting for her to give me more. She didn't. She just stood there, looking hopeful, trying to play it cool. The truth was right there between us. She didn't want to leave, but she didn't want to admit what she was really doing either. Finally, I pointed to the table where the roommate agreement lay, the one she'd signed. Did you read this? All of it. Her smile faltered for just a second, but she recovered quickly. Yeah, I read it. But she didn't sound convincing. I folded my arms. Because it says right here that we're following the rules. No reconsidering. I dropped my voice to a flat tone, not a trace of humor. If you want to reconsider, it's going to have to be under the terms we agreed on. She shifted uncomfortably, and that was all the answer I needed. But instead of backing down, she let out a short laugh, a sound that was as bitter as it was forced. Fine. I guess I'm stuck with the nerdy roommate. Without saying another word, she sat down and started eating. The food was good, I'll give her that. But she wasn't eating it because she was hungry. She was eating it out of spite, as if she could make some point by doing it. Watching her take bite after bite, her mouth full, made the whole situation feel like a game. She was playing and she didn't like losing. When she finished the entire plate, I leaned forward and added, I'll add that to your tab, the dinner, and you're responsible for your half of the groceries. She dropped her fork with a clink, eyes narrowing. You're really going to do this? She asked, incredulous. I just nodded. You signed the agreement. You knew the terms. She didn't say anything else. She got up, grabbed her wine glass, and stormed off to her room, slamming the door behind her again. The silence after that felt thick, like something heavy was hanging in the air, waiting to drop. Over the next few days, things got worse. Tanya wasn't paying her share of the bills, and when I asked about it, she shrugged and changed the subject. She used my stuff, my coffee, my razors, even my clothes without asking, and left a mess everywhere. The dishes piled up in the sink. I wasn't her boyfriend anymore, so I wasn't her maid either. But the worst part? She started hosting Wade. Every night it was the same. Wade would show up around 9, and they'd order food, drink wine, and blast music so loud it rattled the windows. I'd get home from work, tired as hell, and walk into the chaos. Music thumping through the walls, the smell of takeout in the air, and her and Wade lounging on the couch like nothing was wrong. I started taking notes, documenting everything. I didn't want to play her games anymore, so I started sending messages every time she ignored the terms of our agreement. You're still responsible for half of the utilities this month. You didn't clean up your dishes. That's in the agreement. Every little thing, I put it down in black and white. She didn't like it. One morning, she texted me, asking if I was seriously going to go after her for every little thing. I didn't reply right away. I didn't have to. The paperwork was already there. My side was clear, my point was made. I didn't need to keep explaining myself. She ignored the invoices, skipped more payments, and threw more parties. And with each passing day, I felt less and less like I even recognized her anymore. She was slipping further away from the woman I'd been with. I didn't expect Tanya's mom to call, but when my phone rang that afternoon and I saw her name flash across the screen, I knew what it was about. "Hi, Mrs. Mitchell," I answered, trying to keep my voice calm. "Don't hi me, Alex," she snapped, not wasting a second. "I just got off the phone with Tanya, and she's in tears. She's telling me you're being emotionally abusive, making her pay half the bills like you're some kind of tyrant. What the hell is wrong with you?" I wasn't surprised, but hearing it from her stung anyway. "With all due respect, Mrs. Mitchell, I'm not the one who wanted a pause. I'm just sticking to the agreement Tanya and I made." There was silence on the other end for a moment. "She's your girlfriend. You're supposed to take care of her. Alex, even if you're just roommates now, you should be looking out for her." I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my voice steady. "I'm not abandoning her, Mrs. Mitchell. I'm just holding her accountable for her share. This was Tanya's decision, not mine. She's the one who wanted this practical arrangement." "Practical?" Her voice cracked with disbelief. "Practical? She's your girlfriend, Alex, not some roommate you treat like a stranger. You're supposed to take care of her, not turn her into your equal. That's what a real man does." I swallowed down the anger that wanted to come out, but I kept it controlled. "She's not my girlfriend anymore. She's my roommate, and I'm doing exactly what she asked me to do. If you want to blame someone, maybe you should talk to her." She didn't say anything for a moment, but I could hear her breathing heavy, like she was trying to calm herself. Finally, she muttered, "I'm not getting into this with you." The line went dead before I could say anything else. I stared at my phone for a moment. It was one of those moments where everything felt heavier than it should have. Like I was being gaslit into thinking I was the bad guy when all I was doing was following through with what we'd both agreed on. That night, Tanya threw another one of her infamous wine nights. She'd been throwing them almost every weekend since we signed the agreement. This time it was louder with more people. Her friends arrived one by one, bottles of wine in hand, laughter spilling out from the living room. I could hear the chatter from my room, the bass of some music thumping through the walls. I knew what would happen next. They'd trash talk me. They always did. So I grabbed my phone and set it to record just in case. A few minutes in, I heard her friends start in on me. "I can't believe he's making you pay rent," one of them said, her voice loud and judgmental. "That's such a jerk move." "Seriously," another chimed in. "You've been living together for years, and he just flips the switch like that?" "Yeah, and the whole thing about the bills? I'd be so pissed if I were you," another friend added. I could hear Tanya laughing, but it was that forced laugh, the kind you give when you're pretending things don't bother you. "Honestly, I don't even know what happened. I didn't ask for any of this." He just flipped out when I suggested the break. And now he's treating me like a total stranger. I clenched my fists. That was a lie. I hadn't flipped out. I was just doing what she wanted. But this was the version of the story she was selling. Then, in the middle of it all, I heard her quietly, almost casually say, "The best part is, I'm sure he can't afford this place on his own. He's going to cave and sign the lease again. He always does." That's when I stopped recording. I wasn't going to listen to her lie about me anymore. But her words lingered, sharp and cutting, and I knew she was playing me. She thought I wouldn't be able to manage without her. That she'd twist me into renewing the lease because I couldn't afford the rent alone. So I did what I'd been meaning to do for days. I started apartment hunting that same night. I didn't waste time. I knew the place we were in now wasn't worth it anymore. Not with her pulling these kinds of games. I found a place nearby, not far from here, cheaper and with better parking. The more I thought about it, the more I realized it was time to take control. I wasn't going to get suckered back into her drama. I was done with playing by her rules. The next morning, I shot off an email to the landlord, asking about availability. By the end of the day, I had a showing scheduled. I wasn't sure if it would work out, but for the first time in weeks, I felt a little bit lighter. I toured the new apartment on Saturday morning. It was perfect, cheaper, better parking, and the layout was exactly what I needed. I'd have more space, more peace, and honestly, it felt like a fresh start. The second I stepped inside, I knew this place was the answer. The landlord was easy to work with, and I had everything lined up within a few days. It was a relief, like I was finally doing something for me instead of being caught in Tanya's mess. By the time I signed the lease the following week, Tanya had escalated. Wade was over every night without fail. I could hear him laughing through the walls with her, the music blaring, the sound of bottles clinking. I had enough. I knew I was done with this situation, so I walked into the living room one evening, holding the envelope with the 30-day notice inside. Tanya was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. Wade was sprawled out beside her, completely at home, like nothing had changed. I stood there for a moment, letting the weight of the decision settle in my chest. Then, I set the envelope on the coffee table. "Here's the deal," I said, my voice flat. Tanya looked up, her expression soft at first. But then she saw the envelope, and her face hardened. "What's that?" "30-day notice," I said. "You're officially out by the end of next month." She blinked, her eyes going wide. Then, like a switch flipped, her face turned red. "What the hell is this, Alex?" Her voice raised, but she was trying to keep it controlled, like she thought if she yelled enough, it would change the rules. "You can't just kick me out. Where the hell am I supposed to go?" I kept my voice steady, not letting her emotion rattle me. "You chose this. You wanted the pause. And now you've got it. You want to live here, you pay rent. I'm doing what we agreed on. We're both out by the 1st. She shot up from the couch, face contorted in disbelief. "You can't do this. I'm not leaving. You think I'm going to just pack up and go? This is my home too." "I didn't choose this setup, Tanya," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "You did. You wanted to live like this. You wanted a break, not a relationship, and you got what you asked for." Her mouth opened like she wanted to argue more, but then she stopped, staring at the floor. After a long pause, she started pacing. "You're so goddamn stubborn," she muttered, barely loud enough for me to hear. Then she spun around, hands clenched into fists. "You think you can just throw me out like I'm nothing? I'm not going anywhere without a fight." I didn't flinch. "You're not being thrown out, Tanya. You're being asked to follow the rules. You're a roommate, not my girlfriend anymore. That's how it works now." She was breathing heavy, a red flush rising in her neck. "You're so fucking cold. You think you're in control now? You're not. You won't be able to afford this place alone. You'll cave, just like you always do." I shook my head. "No, I won't." Her lips curled into a sneer. She turned to Wade, who had been watching the whole exchange with his usual half-interested expression. "See what I have to deal with? He's going to get us kicked out of here. You better help me figure something out. I'm not going to let him ruin everything." Wade raised an eyebrow. Tanya, I told you I can't really get involved with this stuff. I'm not dealing with roommate drama. She stormed off into her room, slamming the door behind her, and I could hear her crying from the other side. It didn't affect me the way it used to. I knew she was doing it to manipulate me, to make me feel guilty. But this time I didn't flinch. The phone call came the next morning, right when I was making coffee. My brother. Hey man, Tanya called me. Said you're kicking her out. You know that's not cool, right? You can't just throw her out like that. I'm not throwing her out, I said, keeping my voice steady. She made this decision. She's not my girlfriend anymore. We agreed on the terms. If she's upset, that's her problem. Dude, it sounds pretty harsh. She's been through a lot, you know? Maybe, I said, but that's not on me. She can't keep playing games. There was silence on the other end for a second. Then he sighed. All right, I get it. Just don't make it worse than it needs to be. I hung up after a couple more words, knowing my brother wasn't going to side with me. But he wasn't going to pressure me either. My mom called shortly after. She'd heard about everything from my brother. And after she made sure I was okay, she offered to help me move. You shouldn't have to do this alone, Alex. I'll come help you pack, and we'll get you out of there. I thanked her, knowing that no matter what, I wasn't alone in this. Tanya might be making this harder than it had to be, but I had the support I needed to follow through. This was my decision, my future, and I wasn't going to let her pull me back into her chaos. When she came out of her room later that day, she didn't say anything to me. She just shot me a look of pure venom, the kind that made it clear she wasn't done fighting. But I was done. No more games. No more drama. I had my plan. The petty war officially went nuclear the morning I found my video game console sitting in the living room, right in the middle of the coffee table. On top of it, there was a sign written in bold letters. Community property. My blood boiled instantly. It wasn't just the fact that she'd moved my stuff, it was the message she was sending. She was treating me like I was the one who had to share everything, even the things I had before she came into the picture. I stood there staring at it for a few seconds, my hands balled into fists. Then I walked over, grabbed the console, and moved it back to my room, placing it carefully on the shelf where it belonged. But I wasn't letting this slide. I took out my phone, snapped a picture of the sign, then pulled up my notes app. I created an invoice with a line item for unauthorized use of private belongings and set the cost at $50 for the inconvenience of having to move my property back to its rightful place. I printed it, folded it, and left it on the coffee table. No message, no anger, just a simple bill. When Tanya came out of her room a few hours later, she saw the invoice immediately. I watched her face twist with rage as she picked it up, glaring at me. "You've got to be kidding me," she hissed. "That clause doesn't even exist. You can't just charge me for moving your stupid console." I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. Actually, it does. Clause 12, Section C of the roommate agreement. Unauthorized use of private belongings is a chargeable offense. Her eyes flashed, like she was trying to figure out if I was messing with her or not. But I wasn't. I pulled out the printed agreement, handed it to her, and pointed to the section. "You signed it, Tanya. You agreed to it." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she threw the invoice down on the couch, the paper crinkling in her fists. "You're unbelievable," she spat, storming off to her room. The door slammed shut with a loud crack, rattling the walls. I thought I'd gotten through to her, but she came back later that night, and this time, she wasn't alone. Her dad and brother were with her, both of them looking like they'd been prepped for battle. Tanya stood off to the side, her arms folded, watching me as if I were some enemy she couldn't quite deal with. Her dad, a tall, broad-shouldered man who always seemed to speak in a low, growling voice, stepped forward. "Alex, I'm gonna be straight with you," he said, his tone cold and authoritative. "You need to stop this nonsense. You're treating Tanya like crap, and it's gotta end." I didn't flinch. "I'm treating her like a roommate. This is the agreement she wanted. I'm not doing anything outside of what we both signed up for." He shook his head, stepping closer. "You think this is fair? Kicking her out, charging her for every little thing, trying to push her out of her own home? That's not how relationships work. You're supposed to take care of her, Alex. Be there for her. I kept my voice calm, trying not to let the anger rise. I'm not kicking her out. I'm sticking to the terms we agreed on. If you want to blame someone for this, you can talk to Tanya. She's the one who wanted the pause. Tanya's brother stepped forward next, his face twisted in anger. You're gonna regret this, man. You think you can just walk away from all of this and leave her high and dry? You think you'll be able to handle this place on your own? I didn't look at him, just focused on Tanya's dad. I've already signed the lease on a new apartment. I'm moving out on the 1st and Tanya is too. That's the agreement. Her dad let out a frustrated sigh, glancing at Tanya, who was watching all this with a scowl on her face. You're being unreasonable, he muttered, stepping back. This isn't over. They left shortly after, all of them silent, leaving me standing in the middle of the living room. I took a deep breath, trying to shake the tension out of my shoulders. It was done. They had tried to intimidate me, but it hadn't worked. I wasn't backing down. The next day, Tanya broke down in a new way. She posted a rant on social media, calling me abusive and accusing me of trying to ruin her life. She painted herself as the victim in all of this, like I was the one who had betrayed her. I let her have her moment, but then I posted my side. I shared the roommate agreement, the invoices, the texts. I didn't go overboard, just the facts, backed with receipts. I didn't need to say much. The documentation spoke for itself. It didn't take long for people to start picking sides. Some of our mutual friends reached out, saying they didn't know what was going on, but that they understood where I was coming from. Others sided with Tanya, believing her version of the story, but more and more people started seeing the truth. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but I was done fighting. The facts were out there, and the only thing left to do was wait. It was a few days after I posted everything when I got a message from someone I didn't expect. Kayla, Wade's ex. She'd seen my post, and something about it caught her attention. Apparently, the situation wasn't as one-sided as Tanya had been making it out to be. Her message was short and to the point. Hey, I saw your post. Seems like our stories match up. Wade pulled the same stunt on me 2 months ago. I didn't even hesitate. I replied, asking her to explain, and we set up a time to meet for coffee the next day. When we sat down at the cafe, Kayla was way cooler than I expected. She was funny, self-assured, and didn't seem to have any of the drama Tanya had dragged me through. She smiled when she saw me, waving from across the room. I gotta admit, this is a weird situation, but I'm glad you reached out. We chatted for a while about Wade, and it turned out he'd done almost the exact same thing to her. The pause where they were still living together for practicality. The manipulation, the trying to make it all seem normal when really he was off doing whatever he wanted with someone else. She told me how she caught Tanya's things in Wade's room and confronted him. He denied everything, of course, but Kayla wasn't buying it. She'd kicked him out, and they hadn't spoken since. When I told her about Tanya's behavior, moving my things, using my stuff, throwing parties, Kayla's face softened with understanding. Sounds like you're dealing with a lot, she said, her voice steady. Honestly, I don't know how you've put up with it. I went through the same kind of thing. The whole, I need space thing. It's a damn game. We laughed a little, but it felt like a relief to be talking to someone who didn't try to manipulate the conversation into being about them. As we finished our coffee, she told me she was looking for a new place to live. She didn't want to go back to her old apartment after the breakup with Wade, and she needed a roommate. I couldn't help but feel the pieces falling into place. You know, I said slowly, I've got a place lined up and I need a roommate. If you're still looking. Kayla raised an eyebrow, giving me a playful smile. You're asking me to move in? I nodded. I am. We've both been through enough crap with these people. It seems like it'd work. She laughed. That's bold, but honestly, I'm down. No drama, no bullshit. I need a clean start, and you seem like you've got your shit together. I felt a weight lift off my chest. Felt right. And it was nice, for once, to be making a decision for myself that felt like a win. As I left the cafe, I felt like I was finally starting to move on. I had a solid plan, a good roommate lined up, and maybe, just maybe, I'd start to feel like myself again. But Tanya wasn't done. The very next day, I came home to find the fridge raided. She'd eaten all my food. Not just a little, but everything, the leftovers, the frozen stuff I had planned on using for the week, even the stuff I was saving for lunch. I took a slow, deep breath, trying to hold my frustration in check. I snapped a picture of the empty shelves, the destroyed packs of food, then fired off a quick message. You owe me for the groceries. This is the last time I'm letting you take advantage of me. It wasn't even a minute before she was texting back, furious as usual. You're such a control freak. You seriously can't let go of anything. I didn't engage in her baiting. I didn't have time to get into another fight that wasn't going anywhere. I just pulled up the last invoice I'd sent her and added a new line item. Unauthorized use of food, $60. Then I printed it, left it on the counter with a note. Due by the 1st. I knew she'd try to throw a fit, but I was done. I was tired of letting her drag me through her mess. Tanya had crossed the line, and I wasn't backing down. It was late when I got the text from Wade. The kind of message that you don't expect but kind of know is coming. We need to talk. I didn't have a clue what he wanted, but at this point, I wasn't about to back down from anything. I agreed to meet him at a bar nearby. When I walked in, he was already sitting at a booth, nursing a beer. His shoulders were hunched, like he was bracing for something. Alex, he said when I slid in across from him. His voice was tired, like he'd been running on empty for a while. He rubbed his face, the stubble on his chin giving him an almost guilty look. Listen, I owe you an apology. I blinked. An apology? He nodded, running his hand through his hair. I didn't know everything that was going on. I didn't know you and Kayla had connected until after everything hit the fan. That caught me off guard. What do you mean, connected? Wade shifted uncomfortably in his seat, like he wasn't sure how much he should be saying. Look, I didn't even realize what was happening between you and Tanya. She kind of steamrolled me into the relationship, and I wasn't really paying attention. She made it seem like things were fine, like there was nothing wrong. I didn't know you two were still tied up in each other's messes. I stared at him for a second, feeling that sickening twist in my stomach. So he was just as clueless as I had been, thinking everything was fine while Tanya played her games. Wade, I said slowly, leaning in, you and I are both getting dragged through this, but I'm moving on. Kayla's gonna be my new roommate. The color drained from Wade's face. Wait, what? He stammered. You and Kayla? I nodded, letting the weight of my words sink in. Yeah, she's gonna move in. No drama, no games, just normal living. Wade swallowed hard, eyes darting away like he was trying to process it. Man, you're serious about this, huh? I didn't even try to hide the frustration in my voice. Yeah, I'm serious. You should have been, too. I'm not playing games anymore, Wade. You and Tanya. You're both trying to control everything, but I'm done. He leaned back, exhaling like a man who had just realized how deep he was in it. I don't know what to say to that. I've been trying to figure out how to get out of this without making it worse. But now, he shook his head, clearly panicking. I didn't know you two were even talking. What if this messes things up with Tanya? Not my problem anymore, I said firmly, standing up. I'm done cleaning up her mess. You should have done it months ago. You made your choices. I turned to walk away, and he didn't stop me. That night, after I got back home, Tanya stormed in, red-faced and screaming. You think you've won, don't you? Her voice was shrill, completely unhinged. You're trying to destroy me. You're making my life hell. You want to ruin everything. I stood in the living room, not reacting, just watching her fall apart in front of me. Tanya, I said, my voice calm. You asked for this arrangement. I just stuck to it. Her eyes widened with fury. You asshole, she shouted, taking a step toward me. I've had enough of this. Before I could even react, she grabbed a glass from the coffee table and hurled it against the wall. It shattered on impact, the sound echoing through the room. The glass shards scattered across the floor, and I could see the rage and desperation in her eyes. I didn't flinch. I didn't even raise my voice. I just walked over to the shattered glass, took out my phone, and started taking pictures. "That's going on your tab, Tanya," I said coolly. "Damage to property, $50. Her face went pale. For a moment, she looked like she wanted to say something, but then the anger collapsed into something else, something darker. Her face crumpled, and she buried her head in her hands, sobbing. "You're so cold, Alex. So cold," she whispered between the tears. I stayed silent, letting her cry it out. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. I wasn't going to let her guilt-trip me into feeling responsible for her mess. The next morning, I signed the lease with Kayla. The apartment was officially mine, and I was officially done. I didn't look back as I made it official. The lease was signed. Tanya had her chance, and she chose to play games instead of being honest. Now, I was living on my terms, and I was done cleaning up after her. When I sent her the final invoice, the one with the new damage charges, I made sure to include a note, due by the 1st. The day I moved out felt like a weight lifting from my shoulders, but it didn't come without a fight. I hired movers to handle the heavy lifting, but I wasn't going to let Tanya have the satisfaction of thinking I was just walking away. I packed up everything I could, separating my stuff from hers like it was a damn battlefield. I wasn't just moving, I was reclaiming my life. As soon as the movers arrived, Tanya called in sick to watch the process. I could hear her pacing around the apartment, trying to micromanage everything. "Are you sure that's the right way to do it?" she kept asking from the living room, barely keeping the anger out of her voice. I didn't engage. I was focused. But when I grabbed the TV, her eyes went wide. She stormed over, blocking me as if I'd taken her firstborn. "You're not taking that. It's mine." I didn't look at her, just held up the receipt for the TV. "I paid for this. It's mine." She froze, her face turning from red to pale in seconds. "You're really going to do this, huh? Fine, take it. But I'm calling the cops." "Go ahead," I said, voice steady. "They'll just tell you it's a civil issue." She did exactly what I expected. I heard her dial 911, her voice shaking. "He's taking things that aren't his. I don't know what to do." I stayed calm, not even looking in her direction. By the time the cops showed up, the movers were almost done. The officers took one look at the situation, listened to Tanya's frantic claims, and glanced at the receipt I showed them. After a few questions and some quick deliberation, they informed her it was a civil issue, nothing for them to handle. "You're free to leave," one of them said, as the other walked to the door. "This isn't a criminal matter. We can't intervene in civil disputes." Tanya, still shaking, didn't say anything else. She just stood there, red-faced, looking like she was about to explode. As they left, I turned back to her, a little smirk on my face. "You might want to consider reading the fine print next time." She didn't respond, but I could see her eyes burning with fury. I was done with her games, done with the manipulation. I walked back into the living room, pulled out the final invoice, and handed it to her without a word. It was a long list: rent, food, damage, and all the petty nonsense I'd had to deal with. It added up to nearly $3,000. She stared at the invoice for a moment, like she couldn't believe it. Then, without warning, she ripped it up, the sound of tearing paper filling the room. I didn't flinch. I calmly pulled out a backup copy from my bag and placed it on the table, sliding it toward her. "This one's a backup. Keep it safe." She slammed her fist on the table. "You can't do this. You can't just take everything from me and make me pay for it. I won't sign this." I didn't argue. I didn't need to. "You've already signed the agreement, Tanya. I'm just holding you to it." The last of the movers finished packing up my stuff, and I walked toward the door, glancing over my shoulder. "Good luck with everything," I said, then left before she could come up with another tantrum. When the landlord showed up later that afternoon, I handed him everything. The documentation of unpaid rent, the food charges, the damage, the invoices. I could feel Tanya watching from the hallway, her hands shaking. The landlord nodded, flipping through everything with a quick glance. "Looks like she owes more than the deposit," he said, tapping his pen against the papers. I'll deduct the damages, but there's still a balance left. Tanya tried to interrupt, but the landlord didn't even look at her. You're responsible for this, Tanya. You should have taken care of things earlier. This is what happens when you don't. She turned to me, eyes wide with panic. You're really going to do this? You're going to make me pay this much? I didn't make you do anything, I said, the words coming out like they were the last of the emotional energy I had. You did this to yourself. The landlord left, but Tanya didn't stop. She started pacing, muttering under her breath, and then something broke inside her. I could see it in the way her shoulders slumped, the desperation in her eyes. She was spiraling, and I knew it wasn't going to end well for her. A few days later, I found out Wade had dumped her. I wasn't surprised. After everything, I knew it was only a matter of time. The people she'd been leaning on were starting to walk away. But none of that mattered to me anymore. I was out. I was done. I had my new apartment with Kayla, and the peace I felt was enough to remind me that sometimes doing the right thing meant walking away and never looking back. Kayla and I settled in quickly. The apartment was everything I needed. Quiet, spacious, and, most importantly, drama-free. We both kept to ourselves most of the time, respecting the boundaries we set up from the start. We even had a no-dating clause, something I laughed at when she suggested it, but now it felt like the best decision I'd made in a long time. We got along well enough to coexist without any of the mess I had with Tanya. There were no late-night arguments, no messy drama, just two adults living their lives. Kayla had her friends over sometimes, but they were easygoing, and we all respected each other's space. It was peaceful, and I hadn't realized how much I'd craved that kind of normalcy until I had it. Meanwhile, Tanya never did pay the invoice. It wasn't surprising. I knew it was coming. After a month of silence, I filed a small claims case against her. It was straightforward. I had the documentation, the receipts, everything. She never showed up for the hearing, which meant I won by default. The court ruled in my favor, and I was granted the amount she owed, nearly $3,000. Word started getting around. Mutual friends who had taken Tanya's side before began to shift their opinions. A few reached out, apologizing for getting caught up in the chaos, telling me they should have believed me from the start. Even her wine night crew, the same people who had trash-talked me just weeks before, started sending me messages of regret. They admitted they'd been played. Then, months later, I got a text from Tanya. It was short, simple, almost like nothing had happened. She said she wanted to reconcile. She said she missed me and wanted to talk things through. I stared at my phone for a while, trying to decide how to respond. I didn't have to think long. I typed out a message. Sure, we can talk. But first, here's your updated balance. I attached the invoice. She'd blocked me within the hour. I wasn't bitter about it. Honestly, I felt nothing. I'd given her every chance to make it right, and she'd chosen her path. I was moving on, and I had no reason to look back. And the best part? I wasn't alone anymore. I was dating Casey, a trainer from my boxing gym. She was strong, smart, and more than anything, real. She got it. When we talked about moving in together, the first thing she said was, "If we take a break, I'm moving out." No drama. She understood boundaries. She read contracts, and she knew what it meant to respect someone's space. It was like breathing for the first time in forever. I didn't need to convince anyone of anything. I didn't need to fight to be heard. With Casey, everything just clicked. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be.